I'll call the Eastham Zoning Task Force meeting to order. This meeting is, this is an open meeting. We are being recorded. We are both in person at Town Hall as well as available virtually. And as a recorded meeting, this will be available for anyone who wants to listen to it on the town website. We have minutes from our January 14th meeting that Carolyn has prepared. Thank you, Carolyn. Do you want to,
I haven't.
yeah, I didn't realize she'd slipped out. Take a minute.
Well, we're talking about minutes. I'm going back and cleaning up to be sure all the minutes are on the website, the town website. There are a couple of meetings that I wasn't at that I don't have notes for. So I may reach out to Mary, to you and the rest of the committee to see if anybody has notes that would be sufficient.
Okay.
This, some of them don't have recordings, so I can't, some I can go back and look at the recordings or some that just no recordings.
Yeah, I think a couple of them when we met,
Yeah.
were they the ones where we met over at the police station and stuff? Yeah, we didn't have that.
Okay. Okay, Pat, we held a vote, and have you had a chance to take a
I
look?
did.
Okay.
I think they're lovely.
Can I get a motion to accept the minutes? So Kevin, a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, minutes are done. I had mentioned that, I'm gonna turn this over to Paul. We had a really good conversation with the Cape Cod Commission, who, made several suggestions, as well as some architects who Paul got some feedback on some dimensional issues. So, nothing really substantive, but a lot of just tightening up and some, as this document was sourced from, or the changes were sourced from multiple places in terms of Ted Broverwood's, his own case studies, his draft, some of the other bylaws from other towns. So as a result, this being put together over the summer, we're still going back and finding just omissions and things that weren't necessarily presented exactly right. So there's a little bit of cleanup, but I'm glad we found it before we go much further. So without further ado, Paul, do you want to just walk through what you think is going on here?
Yeah, so there wasn't a whole lot of stuff. And this is the information I sent out. Anything that was in yellow was the changes from last time. And so just reorganizing these things. This is, again, as Mary said, based on the feedback. It's good to have these other eyes kind of that haven't been buried in it to look at it more objectively, spot things. So no changes in the language, just moving it up so that it's in the definition section, because these are basically definitions, so there's no change. It's just moving it up so that active and semi-active are in the definition section. And this is the section talking about the uses of buildings, front, back lot buildings, where things can go and so forth. So it was pointed out that it really relates to this whole chart, which again lays out what you can and can't do. It was originally just mixed use, and we kind of figured it should really be pertinent to commercial and mixed use. So it's really just changing the wording and the name on the chart. So again, nothing changes. It's just what it refers to. This section we discussed last time we all met, but this was a waiver language we put in there to allow for the potential that if someone wanted to do a multifamily housing at the multiple, 3 large buildings, 39 feet, can they just do that? So it's set back 100 feet back without having to do a frontage building just for the sake of having to meet that. So we put this waiver language in that basically allows that to carve out for it only in the limited commercial and transitional and trade park, which is where we want those larger buildings. The only change here was that I had the language that basically says what you need to do for screening. It was referring to the parking driveway screening. And it really should just be the other section, which is just the general landscaping stuff, so. That was that change. Again, we just added mixed use and commercial to denote this chart applies to those. Other changes. I didn't highlight, there was still, we had taken out the word stories. Before, there was a few of the
The word
word
stories.
stories in there, so I just left that in, took those out. Put in the footnotes that go to the bottom, all these footnotes, just embedded them in to where they're supposed to go and refer to. Added in this. Notation, just so folks can get pointed to, when they're reading this, there's the chart later on that has the illustrations, the building configurations, so just ease of reference. The wording on this changed, and to just clarify that this is street setbacks, the reason we did that is because when Jack and I were looking at this line, we had the streets in here, but it didn't really make sense because you may have the side or your rear, the rear of your side building may be on a street, in which case you want to meet the street setback, so it didn't really line up. So this gets changed back to 10, which is what the current bylaw is now, so just keeping it the same. So again, if you have you might have to be on two streets, you're gonna have to meet the street setback. You're in front of your building and maybe your side or rear is on the street, you're gonna have to meet the street setback, so you refer to that line in the chart. This one we had some discussion on, and I gotta thank Jackie, because she was really on top of this when she was going through the bylaw and kind of figuring out like, this doesn't necessarily make sense. And we were drawing diagrams and trying to, so. Just some quick background, so in the dimensional chart, the other dimensional chart. The side and rear setbacks, your standard setback for like new construction, blank slate project would be 10 feet from the side and rear. We put this in here because where you're abutting a residential. We want to have some extra. Buffer in there, so we said, if you're abutting residential and you're doing commercial mixed use, you gotta be 20 feet back, not 10. And then your building height should be 24, what we're trying to accomplish is to be able to have something step back, so you didn't have a 35 foot building. Right over 10 feet off of a fence and you're looking down into someone's backyard. Right. When we kind of gamed this out. It really didn't make sense because it was going to result in. It was confusing and how you would actually construct the building. I'm actually. You're always more adept at explaining this. Little bit.
So the way I think of it is we have, and we'll continue to have a horizontal regulation on a setback. This was adding a vertical regulation at a setback. So very specifically, if your building is at that line, is it your eave height is 20 feet? Is it your roof height is 20 feet? Is it the long end? Is it the gable end? Is it? It just gets into too many construction level questions of how do I actually build a building that matches that? And I will say, Chloe from the commission also pointed out having a vertical line at the setback line, if I'm the builder, all I'm gonna do is push my building in 6 inches, 12 inches, and I'm no longer at the setback line and I don't have to abide by that. So it's just really regulating something that makes it more complicated to build. But also because of the guidelines on pitched roofs. Right, this would make a lot of sense if we were building square flat roof buildings, then that's the full building height. But with pitched roofs, we're really already controlling for that sort of edge height, if you will. It's just unnecessary.
So we talked around that for a while, and everyone agreed that. It was complicating it.
Unless you wanted to go into 4 or 5 new definitions in terms of the heights and the land and all that stuff, then it's.
So we. Propose to remove that. Item. No change here. I did ask the commission if they can come up with something better than this, hopefully they will. You know, no one likes that, so,
I don't find it offensive, but then I'll be the only one.
and I did ask, for the design guidelines, I had those placeholder things, I just basically asked if the commission has better graphics or better reference photos in their library of things, that send them to us and put them in.
It wasn't actually a whole lot.
No,
No, it was.
This, we recommend that we allow the shed roofs in all the sub-districts instead of just trade park, but we change the roof pitch to make it a little more pleasing, I guess, and that was based on some feedback from the architects that I talked to, that it's fine, it's a, you know, it's a pretty ubiquitous
Right.
roof form, and it's kind
I'm happy to see that.
of, so that will be back in. This is that graph for the footnote above, so when you're looking at that chart, be a cue to like look down, look at here to see what we're actually talking about. No changes here, the sod materials, I just had these numbers,
In the wrong
backwards. So we fix that, obviously you want more. Glass on the ground floor. This graphic we'll no longer need because we got rid of the height in the table above, so that'll go away.
That was that rear setback next to residential.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that if you had an existing footprint that was non-conforming, you'd have to be in that kind of a step back situation to build a second floor, and it was.
Yeah, and this actually got this discussion got triggered from discussion that we were having with the builder. A preliminary discussion, and he was looking at this like, this is gonna make me have to build this weird roof configuration. I'm gonna lose area on the second floor where I wanna have the apartment on, so it kind of just got into this discussion, so it was kind of fortuitous timings, we kind of realized this was not probably the best part of the regulation. Here.
Some of it is, I think. And she
So we're
said,
still doing, yeah, so still doing some cleanup for consistencies and numbering and little odds and ends, but basically that's the only change to the language so far. So,
well, I think it's pretty awesome that the commission staff didn't have anything else to say. You know, any other
Mhm.
recommendations or concerns? It shows how much pre-work you did with Sarah and other people in the commission. I think that's outstanding.
and it worked out well, yeah. You know, they're always looking for consistency with the purpose and the intent of the whole thing, to begin with the big picture thing. So I don't, you know, we were never gonna run afoul of that, but it's good to clean up all these little things ahead of time, so. So the commission will. Put together a staff memo. That'll basically endorse this whole thing and support it, and then that will go. Actually, the commission staff, I should say, was doing that, and then this whole package of material will go to the Cape Cod Commission itself, the reps. So at that public hearing, they'll have
Yeah.
all the background and
They said they were gonna write a staff report and then plus probably just give them our report for context.
Yeah.
They're not gonna give them the marked up version of this thing.
so Mary and I have trimmed down PowerPoint that we can, that formal presentation, of the hearing. based on when I did this first time, I don't anticipate any real issues. There might be just some general curiosity questions, clarifications, but I don't,
And who's our representative to the commission?
I don't think we have one right now. I think Joy Brookshire was, and I think she stepped off. I don't think, when I checked a few weeks ago, I don't think we have one right now. Maybe I can check.
Anyone want to volunteer? No. Well, I think they only meet like twice a year or something. It's good.
In our presentation, East Ham's presentation to the Cape Cod Commission is the 27th this month.
The 27th.
Yeah, whatever the schedule says,
Thursday,
yeah,
Thursday.
27th, yes. And where is that?
It's at the county court complex. in West Virginia.
In Boston?
I know we've been encouraging everybody to come, and you're certainly welcome to, and that would be great, but this should largely be a formality, but.
Is it recorded? Can people zoom into it?
Yeah, they record them, yeah, and yeah, Zoom, I'm assuming they're doing Zoom too,
Okay.
so, but I mean. Appreciate anyone who wants to come, but.
Well,
don't
what's,
Cancel your
oh, yeah, yeah,
anniversary plans to come to this.
exactly.
It should just
So
be
it's
a very.
purely optional. What is your feeling as yourself and Mary? Do you want more support there for people to say that, you know, the public is behind us, or do you want to be there sort of on your own and?
I think of the 2 dates that week, the community session is the one. If
On the 26th.
on the 26th, that I really would like everyone to be there and be well, you know,
Take the face of the.
yeah, and if it's, yeah, we can, I certainly would introduce people, but I would then, you know, just say that when we get to Q&A, you know, everyone can jump in terms of what the intent or what we're trying to achieve.
I have 2 task force public meetings on the calendar, one for the 26th and one for March 4th.
March 4th was a placeholder for an additional information session for the public if we needed it.
Okay,
It could just be office hours for staff. to
so that's
answer
tentative,
questions.
okay. Thanks.
And Paul had a commitment, so I did the Eastham Part-Time Residents Association all on my own. But the good news is they only gave me 15 minutes, so we got the PowerPoint, we cut it in half. We got, other than the title page, there was 14 decks. And I just timed myself that I had a minute a slide, and we got it down to 15. And I got the vice chair or whoever was coordinating with me, said our membership is really interested and enthused. And that's all I got. I mean, they don't vote, but they're really interested and enthused.
That's good.
So that's really good. Yeah. So,
I'm presenting for Paul and I, whoever, at the Fulton Housing Trust on Thursday morning. We're gonna.
you gonna do this?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, you should use
If I could
use the 15 slides, which
Yeah,
we cut
that'd be
down.
great.
Yeah, and
I didn't know if you were planning to come to that meeting, so,
I'll be there,
oh, okay.
as far as I know, unless something else.
Yeah,
works
okay.
for me, but-
So you could decide if you want to do it, want me to do it, either one.
well, that's an important one, given how much, how much housing is in this
Right.
proposal.
They'll be thrilled.
Good. Well, make sure they come out on the 26th and tell everybody. how thrilled they are.
Yes.
Yeah, great, great.
It's called Conservation Commissions tonight.
Yes. You expect any issues with that?
And that's just
Never
a
know.
Zoom meeting.
Yes, it's a Zoom. Again, it's
They don't meet
gonna
in
be
person.
a very short. We'll do the short presentation, but
You might
they
get,
might have some questions.
you might, I was gonna say, you might get more questions, because a number of those people were also on the Tea Time and Town Plaza.
Yeah.
Master plan, so they would have a lot of questions, I would imagine. Okay. So,
There will be there will be a second session with finance committee. It's either gonna be the 27th, which I already told Rich, the 27th, final work,
yeah,
or March 4th.
that was the placeholder for the other
Yeah, so
information.
I just told him if It absolutely had to be the 27th. Unless the meeting, unless they start the meeting later, or we're at the end of it. So let's try to make it on the 4th.
Okay.
The March 4th Finance Committee.
Paul went to the finance committee this week. And Rich had organized it, so Paul would pretty much present his budget, which he did. But the committee really want to hear about the zoning proposals, so. He didn't have a lot of questions on the budget, but they want us
Well, that's
back to
good.
his zoning
Yeah, we
proposals.
talked just high level and then a little bit about ADU, but.
Yeah.
We'll
Okay.
give them the full
Okay,
show.
okay, great. All right, any other questions on this, on the bylaws, the amendments?
Do we need to take another vote to approve it with the changes?
I guess we could probably be on record to say, just the amendments, and there are other, there may be, so we don't have to vote again, there may be some other typographical issues, so let's just assume that these changes and anything else that falls into a typographical error, we'll assume that the staff will be editing this, for consistency. So do I have a motion to approve this document going forward? Kevin, second, all in favor?
Yeah.
Aye, great, okay. So that's good, okay. ADU,
You wanna talk about review or talk about, I want to go over the public info session.
oh, let's talk about the public information session, yeah.
Alright, so. That's set for the 26th. We have the library book from 3 to 7. The library's closed that afternoon anyway, so we don't have any issues with before or after, but. The meeting will start at 4. What? Jack and I were talking through this yesterday, what we thought might be a little bit of a twist on how we usually do things, but also add some flexibility and convenience would be, instead of doing one session, we basically can do like 2, maybe 3 staggered presentations. And again, this will be like the slim down version, but we could run a presentation from 4 to 4:30, then have a half hour for Q&A and refreshments or whatever. Run another one from 5 to 5:30, and then maybe a third one. So presentation, Q&A, food. That way, you don't have to show up from 4 to 7. You can show up at any time and catch the presentation and still have time for a little one-on-one interaction with questions and everything. The other part of this is Jackie did arrange for childcare. So the library staff and the rec will be able to do childcare for ages 3+. We'll advertise it that, all ages are welcome, so if you got your baby, whatever, yeah, come in, but 3 up, 3 children 3 and up. And still have entertainment and stuff for them. So we're trying to add some flexibility to this. So that was basically the thought of how we might arrange this. And again, we've never really done anything like that.
I'm a little concerned, just chopping this up. I mean, I will say that I'm glad I got 15 slides through, but I didn't think we scratched the surface. Like, so the 2-hour thing we did with the select board, we shouldn't be doing anything that in-depth. But that 15-minute was not, it was nowhere near.
How many sessions did you want to get into the 4 to 7? 3? Like, you want to?
Well, if we did a
4,
4, we could have a half hour presentation.
and then a half hour questions.
Questions.
And were you thinking of doing 3 mini sessions?
That would, we have it booked 4 to 7, so we could technically.
Yeah, I wouldn't do more than 2.
So-
90 minutes is, I agree that doing 3 hours, you can go down this rat hole,
Yeah.
we do a 25-minute presentation, like 2.5 hours of.
Yeah,
questions.
no, I agree.
But maybe we split 2 different sessions.
Maybe if it's 90 minutes, 'cause
90, yeah, well,
I don't think 15 minutes is enough.
No,
Well,
it's not,
It's-
it would be a half hour
So-
presentation.
If I can jump in, I think the idea is, right, if you've got that half an hour presentation, people who are looking for the basic level, okay, have an understanding,
Yeah.
I've asked and answered a question, or I've heard a question, I've seen the boards,
in
I'm
30
gonna go home,
minutes.
I'm gonna cook dinner, I'm all set, I'm going to my other commitments. People who wanna stay and learn more can stay and learn more. They can ask more questions, they
Yeah.
can stay for the next round and ask to dig in more deeply. They can pull somebody aside to say,
Right.
I really wanna understand this better. But we're trying, right, to create a way for more people
Mhm.
of all kinds and all commitments to engage in a way that they can. You wanna stay longer? Stay longer.
Right.
If you have hard-hitting questions, if you want the details, let's dig in. But if you can only be here, it just, when it's scheduled as these long, even 90 minutes.
Right.
No, no,
people
no,
say,
I
don't have time."
I agree, we're not good at communicating, I mean, it's my one critique of the town, I just don't think we're good at communicating. And if we start making this meeting too tricky, like, I think we're gonna have to have a great communication strategy that says, there's gonna be 2 sessions on, you know,
Sure,
if you wanna come at 4 o'clock,
5:30.
4 to 5:30, we're gonna have childcare.
that's the
And
plan.
we're gonna do this.
Yep.
If you don't wanna do, there's a second session that'll begin at 5:30, but we'd have to be enormously clear
Just be clear.
about those 2
Yeah, if,
sessions.
for instance, the first session is, as you say, a general overview, that most people would take that home with them and say, okay, I got it. And the second one is more nitty gritty detail. People have to know, I'll go to the second session instead and get the
Yeah.
nitty gritty detail. They've missed the
No,
overview,
no,
so
I-
it has to be.
No, I think they both
disagree.
have-
That's
Yes, you
just a
were saying.
3-hour meeting then, it's a different agenda, I think you make it 90 minutes and 90 minutes. And if somebody wishes to stay, like, oh, I didn't really catch it on the first time, or my answer wasn't, questions weren't answered succinctly on the first session, they can stay for the second
Yeah.
session.
So you're saying that both sessions are handling
I think they
pretty much the
should.
same information.
Like Jackie-
not-
Jackie's
It'll
point
be
of-
the same presentation.
Our attention span for 90 minutes is pretty good.
Yeah.
For a town, but for 3
Yeah.
hours, a lot of people are gonna look at that and say, oh, good luck with that meeting.
Yeah.
I don't have 3 hours
Yeah.
on Thursday.
Well, that way you can show up at 4 or 5 or anytime in between and stay through.
Still get whatever.
Right.
Well, I think we should, but I think we should advertise it as a 4 to 5:30 session,
Right.
not that you'd be excluded, and a 5:30 to 7
Right.
session. So people don't repeat it, because people,
Right, we can do that.
yeah, I mean, but I think we'd have to be really,
Just be clear.
we gotta be really clear, and if we're gonna do childcare for the first one,
We do childcare for both.
okay,
both.
oh, but for both.
But you can't leave your kids and go out for dinner.
I'll be guarding the door. We're here to learn.
Mary, back up a little bit, so the meeting that you had that wasn't long enough, so thinking about what we're saying now, how much more time do you think you would have needed?
I mean, I was speed talking through, and I was giving no detail,
And
and
that
there
was-
was no questions,
And that was 15 minutes?
15 minutes.
So,
45, we do 45 and 45. I
yeah,
mean, no one's limiting you on the presentation to say, like, let's not say the presentation is gonna be 15, 20, or 30
Yeah.
minutes. Do the presentation, whatever it needs to be,
Yeah.
whether it's 30, 40 minutes. But the meeting's an hour and a half.
No, I
You have 90
completely
minutes for
agree,
the
it's
second
just, I don't think we hit it with the 15-minute presentation, like, for
Yeah.
example, I didn't do,
Well,
you
we
know,
weren't suggesting.
no, I know, but you said the same deck, because the deck would be,
I think-
Obviously, we would adjust the. deck.
we'd adjust
The
it
point was to have 2
to
or 3
yeah.
half-hour sessions with ample time, but I'm fine with,
292.
yeah, that's fine. We could do session 1, 4 to 5:30, and then we don't put the time limit, it's just presentation and then Q&A.
Yeah.
Session 2, 5:30,
Yep.
presentation,
Q&A,
we'll put, repeat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Q&A, and then
Yeah.
and then we have all the information about the childcare, the food.
Yeah.
And.
Yeah.
All that stuff.
Yeah.
And I was gonna put an Eventbrite thing. So we can put out there so that at least
oh, that's a good,
people can, so we'll have some gauge of
Yeah.
how many people
yeah.
are coming, whatever. And whether you need childcare, so we'll know that. Just for planning purposes, so.
I think doing the same presentation twice is important, because people will say, oh, we didn't hear that in our presentation,
Yeah.
if we go too far
Yeah.
in the second one, too deep. So it's probably best to just
Yeah, we'll get
repeat
different
it.
questions and in the Q and A part of each session, it'll be a little bit different.
Yeah.
But that's okay. Will the sessions be recorded? Since you're at the library?
Yep.
And then we can put a link on the website of the sessions in the Q and A.
Yeah.
right?
So let me just mention to you, the one thing that I didn't go into almost at all, other than referencing, you know, we have a shortage of housing, shortage of rental housing, you know, we're losing working class, workforce age populations. Like that was, like, and then I went on, like the rationale, whatever. But I do think we're gonna talk to voters, and I think some of the economics about why you're doing this that came out of the housing production or the market study should be referenced, not every detail,
No,
but it should be referenced a little more. I didn't substantively say why we did stuff. I just said, here's what we did,
okay,
and here's the big goal.
Well, that's
We had a
part of it.
vision.
part of the introductory part of why we're doing this,
Doing this,
how we do.
how we
You
did,
know, all
yeah.
the different documents we
Yeah.
pulled
Yeah.
in,
Because people there will remember that, what people will remember
right,
those, yeah.
right.
I have a question on the content. Because we gotta be longer than our 15-minute, but shorter than the other one, so. Do you think? My thought is, we don't need as much detail on the nitty-gritty. Dimensional pieces and all that stuff, probably more on the background and the rationale, like Mary said, why this is a good thing, and what it's based on.
Right.
So, you know, so we gotta fine tune and trim some of this content and everything. That's just my thought,
I can do
given
that.
the audience and what, you know,
Yeah.
what the big message is, like, this is
Oh,
best
okay.
practices, this is what we should be doing, if you wanna get to here, we gotta do these things, not get too much in the weeds about the technical.
Well, the weeds are gonna be of interest to developers, but which may or may not be voters. But what we're trying to do is sell this to the voters. And you have to have the big picture. And the developers are the one who wants the weeds, we can provide that, it'll get paid.
And I'll have all of the detailed slide deck and everything, so if you get any
Yeah.
question and answers and someone has a detailed question. We'll be able to get into that, but
My pushback would be, I wouldn't try to avoid discussion around heights and measurements and variance, it's too much. Like, we should be assertive and go and say, yes, there's gonna be a change in heights, here's why we, you know, as you said, here's why we're doing it. And here's the only place where it's gonna apply. And just because those questions are gonna come up.
Yeah.
You know, someone's gonna cherry pick a few things that they don't like and. You know, blast that out on Facebook and you're gonna get 5, 6 people that feel it being, you know, that this is overreach.
So, I mean, basically, other than 3 decks, three pages, there's like 7 pages, which is just the 10 points. But this is like so the height is detailed there. There's a graphic that talks about the height, I'm sorry. There's the architectural details with the roof pitch, sort of a little bullet thing with environmental standards, lighting standards, envisioned roadways. You know, things of that nature. It was just very high level, missing middle types of housing.
Right. I think,
Have you shared that? I'm sorry, Carol, go ahead.
No, we can share this. This was just pulled together.
2 points to, I think, importantly emphasize in the beginning and probably throughout occasionally. This only applies to the central district. And it doesn't require anybody who's owning property in that district to change anything about what they're doing today. Right? If they want to make changes, there's a process for doing that, but I think being real clear that if you own property in the area today, you don't have, this is giving you a vision of what could be in the future, but you don't have to do anything today. And that it really only applies to this district. Because I think that seemed to be at the last meeting, the meeting, a little bit of confusion, even though you said it. I think there were some people whose mind kind of went to, you know, this is gonna apply different places, or you're gonna make retrofit or something. I think just being sure that that's true. The other question I had, you mentioned boards around the room. Some of the details on some of the dimensional stuff could be on the boards, right? But maybe if you want to do that. And that way, if there's somebody who's really interested in the detail, the boards are around and there will be people who can answer all of us there. That
Mhm.
Was it worth
Yes.
making any of the slides
into
from the
boards,
first proposal, the first presentation? We make those.
into boards.
so that-
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
talk about
So
that.
people are up and moving around, whether they're taking their
Sure.
seats or, you know, if we wanna say,
That also gets,
Q&A, get up, move around.
that also gets to the point of, are we going to, typical, the Q and A session will all be focused towards the podium, whoever's running the meeting, not Mary and Paul. But if we're going to have displays all set up around the room, do you want to have people distributed
Sure.
around the room?
Yeah. that would be
Answering
good.
questions to the best of our
That would be
ability to
great.
say, oh, here's where this applies.
As people are coming in before we start the presentation, after the presentation and Q&A, we can disperse around and stand around and try and answer questions.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people don't want to ask a question in the big group. They might ask it
One-on-one,
at standing at a
absolutely, yeah.
Why
board.
don't we have, this is a minor detail, why don't we have little name tags, maybe we can say zoning task
Yeah.
force.
You want to have a way for people to ask questions, via a piece of paper. Like
We
they
did
do not
that
want
with
to
some of
stand.
the tea time forums, we actually still have the slips. We made so many of them, but yeah, our way.
Yeah,
to
questions
submit
ahead of time,
questions.
yeah.
During the presentation, they can fill them out and drop them in the box.
Yeah.
and Somebody can go. up
That,
and find.
yeah, that's really good.
We have 2 slots for the public meeting. How and when will you decide if you're gonna use the second slot? And have a second meeting? Does it have to do
Or
with
the March.
the March meeting? Is it March?
March 4th.
Yeah, forget, I can't read my notes here. Yeah, March 4th. In other words, you might want to make that decision before February meeting so that people know if you want to come and do it again, which is maybe if you have somebody that you know that you think would like to have been here.
Right.
Or what you said, turning it just into office hours.
Yeah, I think office hours would be good.
I
Yeah.
think being at the library,
I
any
also
of
think
us being there.
that if we have 40
Full
people in the first session and 20 people in the second after, session later that afternoon, you may feel it's okay. But if you have 150 people and we can't get people in
Right.
to the library or it's back to back, I think having that reservation and saying, hey, with the outstanding
Right,
turnout tonight, we're gonna schedule it. I think having it reserved but not publicizing it,
Yeah.
because you don't wanna have a meeting and there's 10 people present, you're not gonna say, oh, we're gonna do all this again next week.
right,
If 6 out of those 10 people will be there again next week, so.
right.
Yeah, no, I got it.
But I like the idea of the reserving using the office hours.
So, Paul, that March 4th, you just need to confirm with Richard if that's finance and what time is that? So you do office hours. When does the finance committee meet? They usually meet like 3 to 5. 4 to 6.
Yeah,
They're
but
like
they
late
do,
afternoon
they've been adding in extra meetings starting at different times just because,
because of schedule. Okay,
Such
all right.
but they usually start at 4, I think. 4.
I think it sounds like a good plan.
Okay,
All right, so
Yeah,
March
that's fine.
4th.
yeah,
Good
3,
collaboration.
4. Let's just confirm the finance, and then you can have it in your back pocket to be able to announce. If you could have office hours that morning, or if they're meeting 4 to 6, if you wanna do 6 to 8 at the library or something.
And town manager is also gonna be having her own office hours at the library. And so try to see at least some of those sessions, I'll sit down with her. Any zoning stuff, so.
Okay,
Good plan.
so we get that.
That's good, yeah, I think
That's
that's a good compromise, and
Good,
that'll be a better
Yeah.
schedule for that
Good.
night. And any other details, did I forget anything, we're planning for that? Oh, so we'll do the Eventbrite thing, just so we can gauge.
Now, is that
interest.
just on the town website? Cause like,
Well,
I'm on 2, I don't even know how I got on 2 Facebook sites. That I say Eastham Community and Eastham something,
But they're not the official town.
Right, so I'm working with Kayla on a public information broadcast.
Okay, good.
So it'll be on the town's official Facebook page. We
Yeah.
don't post things on the community page channels that are
Well-
independently run.
So,
Sometimes people repost things, but
Well, I would repost just because
That's
there's a big community out.
if
Like, I didn't
yes.
even know the town had a Facebook page, so that's. a little-
it does, and you
It doesn't
know,
have a good following?
yes.
Oh,
Kayla
okay.
says it is a good following and good engagement. One of the differences is the moderation controls. So when we post things on the town website, it's for information. When you put things out in a community page, the response to that is left to however the moderator of that page
Yeah,
chooses to
right.
allow it to flow.
Yeah.
So I would just caution on that.
No, can we, though, also, I think I mentioned this to Paul the other day, once we've got the details down about these 2 sessions and childcare and food and, you know, all that, could we get some posters or flyers up in
Yep,
the COA, the library, and maybe the post office?
All on my plan.
Okay,
Yep,
good.
flyers going out. We're gonna work with the schools to put it in parent newsletters
Great, great,
as
great.
well, and then we'll put it in all those public spaces.
Fabulous.
And we'll double check with COA, we might be able to get it into their newsletter that goes out.
We maybe have time to put it in the Independent.
For the 26th,
Tomorrow.
tomorrow.
It has to go out further ahead than you might imagine.
Yeah, no, I know.
For them to provide any information.
When does it come up?
We come out to,
Needs. It needs before,
We
a
need to have
week
it out-
before.
We need it on the 20th.
If I got it to Ann today, it could run once before the meeting.
that would be good.
Yeah.
Okay,
And it may be something that's very basic that says there's a public information session for more detailed information. Please see the town website.
yeah,
You know, just so that we've got the time to line up everything.
so that would be in the part of the independent under like, where they do the 4 different towns and what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
yeah, because people look for that.
Yeah.
So we're also working on a video. That will utilize the nice images that we had done and that little snippet of video showed you. So that. Just needs to be edited together. Do you want me to play the
Yeah,
narration?
so Jackie cut and pasted a bunch of the report. And just dropped it into AI. And said I needed video narration,
Oh, really?
and now we have video narration, which I think is so cool.
If it wants to.
Although we need someone
It has to be reviewed.
who, we need someone who has an accent that can
Right,
pronounce
this
Eastham.
On
This
Eastham.
is a quick
Eastham.
run on.
At the
free
annual
AI.
town meeting,
There's lots of other options out there.
at the,
Go ahead.
We have.
There's some minor mispronunciations and things we can clean up.
It's okay.
at the annual town meeting, Eastham stands at a transformative moment, proposing zoning amendments for North East Ham's business districts that will reshape our community's future. Our vision is simple yet powerful: live, work, play. These proposed zoning amendments are more than regulations, or they're a blueprint for our community's evolution, introducing a sophisticated approach called form-based code that fundamentally differs from conventional zoning. Form-based codes are organized around the physical forms of buildings and sites, focusing on how structures relate to the streetscape and surrounding area, rather than strictly segregating land uses. Unlike traditional zoning, this approach uses pictures, diagrams, and clear language to describe development patterns that will create a traditional New England village, honoring our unique local character. The proposed amendments integrate critical community needs, establishing a walkable town center to support year-round community engagement, developing affordable and attainable housing to meet East Ham's diverse needs, and supporting year-round businesses through an expanded customer base and workforce. We're reimagining North East Ham as a vibrant village center where walking to a local cafe, finding meaningful work, or connecting with community becomes effortless. Our strategy includes diversifying housing options by incentivizing missing middle housing, including top-of-shop apartments, townhouses, and multi-generational living spaces. These developments will create environments for young families, working professionals, and longtime residents to live, grow, and support each other. A redesigned transportation network will enhance accessibility, transforming Brackett Road into a classic main street with local shops and restaurants, improving Route 6 with safer sidewalks and turn lanes, and creating new roadway connections to maximize local business potential. The trade park represents a key component of East Ham's economic future. By connecting Holmes Road to Route 6, we'll increase trade space, support emerging industries, create workforce housing, and position East Ham as a dynamic community, ready for future economic activity. This approach is about building resilience, opportunity, and shared prosperity. Importantly, property and business owners within the district won't face mandatory immediate changes. The town is committed to a collaborative approach, working alongside property owners when they are ready to update or redevelop their sites. Our strategic zoning and height allowances will attract developers who share our commitment to thoughtful, meaningful development, creating a framework for sustainable growth that respects our heritage while embracing our potential. The proposed zoning amendments will be voted on at town meeting on Monday, May 5th. Curious to learn more? Town staff are ready to answer your questions. Full details are available on the Town of East Ham website.
That's very good. What input did you give it?
So you just give it the text that you wanted to read.
Oh, you give it the whole text. So
Give it the whole text
was
you
our
wanted to
text,
read.
okay.
There's, depending on the service you use, every voice imaginable, I can put it in any language on the planet. One of these services does allow you to clone a voice. So if you know a quintessential East Ham voice that comes to mind.
Mark Walker.
Not Boston, we're not developing Boston. So yeah, but you know, with little tweaks, I mean, I played with like East Ham's funny, if you just separate East and Ham, if you.
Did you see, he got East Ham right the second
second
time,
time.
but not the first time.
This one allows you to put in,
Have sixes, but.
Right,
yes,
Yeah,
route.
route.
Lots of people in the world
Like
say
route.
route. Yeah,
so I thought that was pretty cool, and the notion that that could run as a loop, with, you know, the graphic images plus the little thing that, do you have that little thing that Peter did?
It's buried somewhere.
Buried, okay.
It
But
also makes it very easy to put it in a native speaking Spanish language video, a native speaking Brazilian Portuguese video to reach, you know, continue to reach as broad of a segment as we can.
so if we can get this together, we could also have this, at the library, like in the lobby, TV. Just on a loop, just so that people come in.
That would be really
We
good.
can close caption it.
Yeah. So I think Devin said he's available today. We can meet with him and see if we can
Do the
get
very.
this all together.
Great.
In terms of another voice, there's a guy I always keep in my mind. We first bought our place. Had a guy come in and work on our chimney. He's sixth generation Kate.
Yeah.
And here he is trying to get business from us, and within the first 5 minutes referred to my wife and I as Washashores. But his voice would be perfect. I just don't know if he's even alive anymore.
No, we can. we
That
can
guy
play with it
isn't
a little
bad,
bit to
he
get it to
just,
feel
the
just
route
right.
and the
Yeah. no,
eastum.
Yes, there's a little time spent fine tuning, and anything else we put in, male voice, female voice. There's a lot of twists.
I'm confused. When is town meeting?
May 5th.
It is Monday, May 5th. So it's not on a Saturday.
No,
Yeah.
we will.
I know, I'm dumbfounded. I've always been on Saturday, as far as I recall.
Well,
Oh,
then,
no.
Well, it's
Sometimes
always,
it used to be
it's
on
only
Mondays.
been since the
COVID.
COVID stuff. It's always been on Monday,
Oh,
Right,
really?
it used to always be on Monday and then COVID, it was outside.
COVID, and then we
So
didn't
they
have
had the high
the high school space because of the
But on
construction.
May 5th, will it be in the high school?
As far as I know, yeah.
Because the gym's done now.
Yeah.
so-
Yeah.
Okay.
so you're gonna miss my Cinco de Mayo party. We're
Oh, it can be,
Flying out that night.
well, you celebrate.
I was celebrating this.
Yeah.
Win, lose, or draw. We're gonna have a margarita.
It's over one way or another.
Yeah. So, okay, good. So you guys are doing great.
That's great.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
moving it
that's
along.
wonderful.
This is really good. Okay. Great. ADU?
Wait, before we leave this, I just have one thought that won't get out of my head. When I talk to people, some people get stuck on one thing, and the one thing that I hear is, well, what about the community center? So I know it's all through there, but I'm trying to anticipate that we'll be talking about some changes and just that's one thing that I think
Well,
might,
the one answer I would say is
Yeah.
we intentionally said municipal uses could
Right.
be used throughout. So and two, we're not developers, we're just laying out what is
Yeah.
possible. So the community center is still possible, but that's much more of a
That's-
town policy.
Well, I'm gonna add a three to that is wastewater management.
Yeah.
right, so.
So separate from your work,
Yeah,
that is also at town meeting and is essential for this and for
Yeah.
community center.
So it's interesting, both those topics very interesting. Should we be linking this with the wastewater? On saying, in this project, in conjunction with the wastewater project, and then go to the wastewater people and say, you know, our project is what's going to enable, you know, doing the zoning without doing the wastewater, doing one without the other is not going to give the results that either one is promising.
Well, I mean, I've answered that and said that the way I've answered it, but this could be discussed, is that, if wastewater does not happen, we provided development that will require, substantial, either whole-scale wastewater treatment plants being built individually or very sophisticated, IA systems.
Yeah.
Which, both of those things will add a lot of cost.
And completely make almost all the visuals that we're including impossible.
Yeah.
Because now you're gonna have to be setting aside large swaths of every lot
Yeah,
for septic.
Yeah.
And, I think it's worth, you know, both Jack and Pat bringing it up, I think it's worth it for us in the presentation, especially at the library for the
Yeah.
public. And maybe even
to link it,
to at least say why they're linked.
Yeah.
Not saying, you know, if you don't vote for this, don't for us, but we'll
Yeah.
have to say that this along with the wastewater.
Yeah.
And the same thing, and this is what's enabling a future.
Yeah.
Community center, and we could say, you know, we're not designing a community center or developing a community center, but this is enabling a community center.
enabling,
Potentially at tea time, potentially on Holmes Road or somewhere else, but this does not this makes it easier.
Yeah.
For that, so. Well, you know, otherwise, those are gonna be the first two questions you get.
Yeah.
And,
Well, it's about housing on that side too.
Right.
Right,
Right,
because,
right.
because T-Time did initially design, the first thing we actually talked about, the first week of T-Time was what about wastewater? Because how do we move forward at all?
Right.
So there was quite a bit of talk years ago about treatment on site as necessary before all of this started coming down the
Yeah.
pipeline. But to then have housing capacity there, right, starts to push.
and large housing developments, it's not unusual, like Lawrence Ave down in Wellfleet. It's gonna be used for other purposes, but they're building a wastewater treatment plant next to that, because they didn't have capacity. It's gonna be used for other things, but
Yeah.
it's there. And I've seen many housing developments, large scale ones, when you get over 100 units.
Right.
That have their own wastewater treatment.
Right.
On site,
But sewer would mean that a more
Yeah.
efficient capacity.
Yeah.
Than forcing developers to.
Yeah.
Treat on
Treat,
site
yeah.
all over the district and.
And Ian, I think, Martin, to your point, this is, and I don't know how to simply say this, but we're saying the density and all of the things we want to happen is in a very small portion of this town. We're just saying we need to have all these things. It coincidentally is also, it's limited because we are the watershed. Like, for example, the limited commercial has real limitations about what could even conceptually be built down by Salt Pond, because that's a watershed. So it's really tied together, these things, we're not doing, the town didn't start the wastewater to support this development. It had to respond to the environmental degradation of ponds and
Right.
Salt Pond. But it just so happens that the degradation is happening in the same place where we could
Well, my-
have commercial
So,
development.
so the one question that will come up will be the capacity of this sewage system. Wastewater system, you know, what capacity, so if we're gonna vote, and I haven't seen the actual number yet, but I know it's gonna be a big number, $50 to $100 million for wastewater. And is there capacity to allow any of this development to happen there?
There will be,
And that level of pause in a public meeting would
can't,
be
yeah,
a
that's
bad
not gonna
look.
work. Well. I'm just. I'll have to think through how to answer that question, or if you wanna have this pause, but I guess I'm pausing just because. I don't know what the exact answer is. Yes, there's going to be excess,
I know,
extra capacity.
And the reason I know that, because this topic came up 2 months ago.
Yeah. But this goes back to what Mary said, like, we're doing this because we have to clean up the environmental issues, so really. This thing is focused on. Getting back to neutral. If we're gonna add capacity, add density. We have to, that's the part, I don't know what the number, what the ratio, what the percentage is of that, and I don't know that. I don't know if that's been determined or whatever, or just, I don't know what the number is.
Yeah.
So that's why it's a little tricky, because it's like, we're doing this to add density and create all this stuff, but there's a limit, you know, it's not gonna be just like. Unlimited capacity, it's going to be a control point, and that's based on what area. Ultimately, where this thing gets sited, how much area we have for recharge. And that's really what it comes down to, is how much area you have to recharge.
So then
Facilitate this
Some sort
water.
of first come, first serve, you know, the first 3 developers in the door get to take advantage of that, and everybody else is shut
Yeah,
up.
so you mentioned the growth neutral bylaw, so that's an important part of the wastewater regulations, is the town has to adopt a growth neutral, which basically we gotta offset. We have to remediate problem, and then if we're gonna add extra capacity, extra density, how are we offsetting that? And there's, you know, different ways, it could be. Could be preserving open space elsewhere, it could be a combination of things. So that has to be figured out, and then that will get to how do we regulate the excess flow, because it can't be first come, first serve, so that's gonna be some sort of. It has to be divided up somewhere, or planned out, or sewer bank where you have credit, you know, so that has to be. Worked out.
Yeah, but even the nature of the development that would go on here could impact what the capacity needs would be. You know, if it gets really intensive on housing, that's probably gonna use more water than, you know, commercial buildings would. And
Well, another thing people will be interested in, you know, one thing we don't have is not much in the line of, medical services facilities, you know, doctor offices, dentist offices are almost invisible in Eastham, and, part of the reason I understand is because they have very high surgery.
Yeah. And it still could be like, even with the sewer system, that there still will be a need to do a on-site treatment system, you know, depending on the nature of any individual project, so it could still be a combination. The developer may say, I'm still gonna do my own treatment plant, maybe smaller and less expensive, because I can.
Yeah.
You know, who knows what the combinations are, but.
Kind of somebody has a bigger piece of land.
Yeah, so, yeah, some thought will need to be given about that, about how to respond to that, but it's just,
Is
I think
it
it's
worth having
important to
somebody,
link them, but.
is it worth having somebody from the, that task force for the sewer task force to be present at the public meeting to answer?
I can ask the. The health department
Yes,
to be there.
answer questions like that, but I think that's. I know we're all in silos, but
Well, and are you having a meeting with the health board and or the health department staff? About the zoning? I know we sent them information. but we
No,
didn't go-
they haven't. I wasn't planning on it. I extended that. To the board and just. Haven't heard back.
They have all the information.
they got everything.
They got like a full binder, the full.
Yeah. That's what I thought. Yeah, I think asking if someone from the health department would be prepared to.
At the community meeting anyways.
Right,
I'm meeting with the town manager Friday also, so I'll bring this up and
right.
see if she has any guidance on how to handle that.
Have a scripted answer, scripted in the sense that you know what you're gonna say, but that they approve of.
We are no longer taking comment on this issue.
Okay,
Okay.
This
all right,
meeting is
all right.
over now.
okay.
Thanks. I wasn't trying to dig you in that.
No, no,
No,
no.
no, it's an important issue and I have it as a,
Well, I think we've always been consistent over a number of years now that these things, the zoning, the wastewater, the Route 6. These all are connected
Right,
and they all, so we've always been consistent. That's why I think it's important. It's just the same method of highlighting that these things are linked. It's just like, I don't know what the final details are on the wastewater and I don't want to get over my skis at a public meeting. And also this is, it's all gonna come down to last minute with the planning and how it's gonna play out at town meeting. So that's why
exactly.
I would hesitate how to properly answer that without like,
Right, because this proposal is typically going to come with the recommendation of all the different boards in town as well as us. This is, I see this going through rather easily compared to wastewater. And then if this goes through and then wastewater doesn't go through, where do we stand then?
Jackie said, well, she said this at the meeting, so I don't think, if it doesn't go through in May, I said, what's plan B? And she said, we'll come back and we'll do another town meeting in September,
For wastewater.
wastewater. Just because the stakes are so high, that if the town truly says no, then she has to rewrite
It depends on what the vote is.
the watershed business thing,
Yeah.
and it just upends all the environmental stuff.
No offense.
I think no wastewater impacts the scale of how these things are happening, but it's still the framework, the bones of this are good.
Yeah.
I mean, without wastewater,
Yes,
the little projects, the smaller things, we
So-
still want these guidelines to exist.
So my question as an engineer, I want to know, is the wastewater, let's say we're going to do a wastewater plant of size A. Can it easily be increased in size as this develops? Because no sense in making people in 2025 pay for a wastewater facility. Like we all agree that this plan is going to take 20 to 30 years to come to fruition. And there's no sense in having today's taxpayer pay for a septic system to support something that's not going to be fully developed for 20 years. So is the wastewater plant designed to be modular, that it can increase in size for the recharge area to accommodate the zoning that we're doing here? Those are like the sort of the core questions of the stuff that I've been reading through. I have no idea. Luckily, nobody's asked me that question, but that's my question is, are we building a wastewater facility that's just gonna get a bowl around it and when it's done 5 years from now, and it reaches its capacity? The rest of this,
so that's a question.
The only thing I've heard from Jackie is that this area focuses essentially on the DCPC area. And that she's in, and this is not a plan per se, but she continues conversation with the town of Orleans to go from Salt Pond down to the Rotary. That Orleans is building a very substantial wastewater and treatment facility down at that end, so she's in the exploration about could we tie into their system for, obviously participate in some capacity
for the DCPC or for the southern?
for the southern part of the town. So when you ask me, is it modular, I think she's thinking of, this is where I have here. And the next stretch is,
Right,
can that happen
my
collaboratively?
question was pertaining just to.
To win the
Yeah.
DCPC, I don't know, I don't know that
So
answer.
those are questions, so that should be asked in the pre-town meetings about wastewater.
Right.
We should be sure that those questions are being asked. So that's part of that topic. It doesn't.
We should go to the town, we should go to meet the administrator. We'll go to the library as a group. We have a bunch of questions.
Well, they'll be having their own, I would assume, series of public information meetings about the wastewater.
Do you know what that schedule is gonna be?
I don't.
Okay. Okay. Okay,
ADU?
ADU,
So. Still. Still waiting on the state for. Guidance, but. The main objective is to get. This bylaw into alignment with the state. Statute, The. Well, I'll just go through it, so. This is a change to the definition of an ADU. Really just parroting the state, and there's no real, it's just,
But the key takeaway here is that we're limiting it to 900 square feet versus.
yeah, or half the gross floor area of the dwelling, whichever's smaller.
Yeah.
Um,
I think before it was 1,200 or something.
you could go to 1,200 or 50%, whichever. And to be honest, there's been a few ADUs that have, met that requirement but they're. When you look at them in context with the house, it's like. To me, it's like visually not. What I envision, it's like basically looks like you get 2 single family homes in it, so I think this is.
This is okay.
Yeah. So. The next. Section here, so. Our current bylaw. Says. The ADU has to be either. Owner occupied. Or rented year round. Can't be short-term rental. The state language talks very specifically about you are. Permitted. It's allowed that you can prohibit short-term rentals. That's allowed. But it says that you can't unreasonably restrict these ADUs otherwise, and this is where it gets a little gray. I want to keep the language that says you have to rent it year round. It's unclear whether the state's gonna interpret that as like going overboard unreasonably, even though the spirit of what we're trying to do, so. And it kind of almost gets into semantics about the way things are worded, but. Our town council talked with the AG's office, the folks that actually are gonna be reviewing these things. About how they would look at this and basically, so I should back up, so one way. That you'll see here is, I tried to work through that is. There's the housing regulations, then there's also the Seasonal Communities Act that was established separately. But that talks about if you're a seasonal community, which we are designated. You can do things like acquire year-round housing restrictions, so I put that language into the purpose section. Here. Thinking. That's the hook that'll let us get this other language we want to keep. The AG. Said that was a novel approach.
she didn't reject it though, so let's.
But they think that maybe because it's not part of the legislation, it's a separate thing to keep it out. But they said basically if you put some language in there that justifies, don't reference the Seasonal Communities Act, but if you put in some. Thing in the purpose section that just basically outlines the very important need that we have to keep these year-round rentals, that they. Tend to look at that as, okay, so we can keep that language, so.
So that's the top piece where you say we have 6.7%.
Yeah.
Versus.
So. This is just out of the housing production plan. I'm a little. Hesitant to like put the statistics in there just because. They get stale,
Yeah, they stay on.
but
Is it in the, can you put it up top in the intro? As an intent? You know how we,
no,
no,
well, no, this would be where this was.
the purpose,
section.
so this is essentially the intent.
I mean, this does the job, but there might kind of trying to figure out a way without referencing, make the case without the data. So I think if we can do that, there's a good shot we can keep. And it's really just that one line that says it has to be a year-round rental. Because it's like. We can prohibit short-term rental, but that's 31 days or less. And then it just, so it. In practical terms, it's like you're either gonna live in it yourself or you're gonna rent it. Cause it's gonna be a hassle to try to play games with like renting it for 30, that one, take a break.
So
But it's still like,
so if I do a long-term rental, let's say I do a 6-month rental to Delmar, I have a lease from Delmar for 6 months, and I get a check every month. What Delmar does with it, we all know, but does that count as a short-term rental from my perspective as the owner?
no, see, I think that would be a way to. That wouldn't be a short-term rental, cause it's more than,
Because I'm getting paid whether anybody comes there or not,
right,
and I have a 6-month, that's how Delmar operates, so everything they
Yeah.
have has a 6-month or thereabouts lease.
so that's what we're trying to avoid. By having.
I don't know how that is legal though, under the short-term rental law, under our rental regulation laws, you can't just make a third party. The
I'm
rent,
not saying it's currently being used to get around it, I'm just saying that's. their
no,
fault.
but I mean, the Delmar theoretically shouldn't be able to operate that way at all in this town, given our short-term
Well,
rental.
that's the fractional ownership.
Well, there's
but-
fractional owners in short-term rental, because your rental registration creates, it's the owner and the town that are in a binding rental certificate, not a third party. Delmar has no rights to a rental certificate. I mean, technically, they have,
But that, I mean, that's talking about the owner, yeah, but I'm saying. Take Delmar out of it, it's just any homeowner, if they wanna, if they could rent to somebody for any period of over 31 days. And you're not a short-term rental, so you rent someone for 32 days, 40 days, 90 days. You're not a short-term rental under the definition. So, but we don't want that, we want year, so that's someone could do that, and we're not creating the units, the use of the units that we want, that's why we specifically put, you either live in it yourself. Or you rent it for 12 months, so that you can't like, or do this interim thing where you're not a short-term rental, but you're not, the in-between, that's what we're trying to avoid, we don't want people doing this in between. Length of time, so. That's why we're trying to preserve that line in there.
In, purpose sentence there, the second sentence, East End's rental housing has declined proportionately. Do you mean year-round rental housing?
Yeah,
I think.
Paul, one of the things that I thought maybe,
Cause there's rental and rental,
yeah,
and
To-
it means different things.
to get away from that specific, what if you made a reference to East Ham's housing production plan adopted January 2024, which documents the substantial or dramatic decline in year-round rental housing, but just reference
yeah,
our
Yeah.
housing production plan, which was approved by the select board
That's
as the
that might be
reference.
good, yeah,
Yeah.
And then you don't have to get into all the little percentages
Yeah.
there.
Mhm.
I like that. So I can work on that, but I guess just the big takeaway is get some language in there.
Yeah.
That justifies the need to keep,
So oh, go ahead.
I'm gonna keep this in here for now. Until someone says it's an absolute no-go, give it, but, and then I did put this in here because just as a.
Mhm.
So that's that section, the other big thing is, from the state perspective is. We can't require a special permit. We don't do that anyways, with the exception of the seashore district, we always treat that a little different because it has its quirky things, We're proposing to just take that out, we still have language, below that basically says. So many words, go at your own risk, because the seashore is. But technically, the seashore is a residential zone. So the state says anything that's any zone that's primarily residential. ADU should be allowed by right. So that's just that change in the table. There's a lot of stuff sprinkled in here that town council put in just to clarify, what this applies to. Doesn't really change the substance. This is the language we have about the seashore. Under conditions and requirements, again, just kind of clarifying that the ADU should meet the definitions as laid out by the state.
If we go back to number one first, is this changing that if somebody has a two-family property or they have two dwellings already on the property, that they can create two ADUs on that property? Where we're taking out the only one?
Yeah.
Now saying one ADU can be done by right for each principal dwelling unit. That's a good one.
So the way with the current bylaw, the way we interpret it is if you had a duplex, you could do two ADUs if there's two principal units.
And we like that.
So this would, I read this as if that would remain, because you have duplex, you have two principal units, each one could have one ADU by right. If you wanted to put three on there, couldn't do that by right. You'd have to go for a special permit to do that. Well, I should back up. This is a question. Right now, I would say you can't do more than one because we don't have language in here that says any more than the one special permit. So this would just basically cut it off as you have the one, you can't put multiple ADUs on. If we want to allow that, we need to put in a line that says additional ADUs require a special permit, which the state is fine with that. It's just everyone's entitled by right to one ADU. Anything over that, we're entitled to regulate that.
I think we should add that by special permit.
They're also, this is all, ADUs are subject to the limitations of the site coverage.
Right.
It's also,
But I don't know if it's that way, Paul. It says one ADU is permitted by right for each principal dwelling unit. How would we define a principal dwelling unit?
that would be the single family home.
Or like you
So a
said,
duplex
our
is two
duplex.
single family homes.
Right. So the duplex would allow you to do two without special permit. If you
That's the
wanted-
way we've been interpreting it over the last few years since this has been in effect. I don't think it's up actually in reality, but
I mean. Here's a little bit of a concern I have. First of all, the universe of ADUs, the town has been pushing ADUs for about 4 or 5 years and we've had what, 11? We have 11?
what's the number?
Well,
No, 24.
we have
We've got-
24,
And built.
yes.
24. So I think it's just a smaller number. Going back to our report, 96% of our town is single family. So we don't even have a lot of duplexes out there to do it. And it's sort of,
But we do have, sorry.
no, I was just gonna
But my
say,
point is like, it's like the big farmhouse on Bridge Road that's been for sale for 4 or 5 years now. It's easily, every time I drive by, it's like, that should be broken up into 5 condos. Because it's on like a 2.5, 3 acre lot. So if someone breaks that up into 4 condos. Well, then, a year later, they can come and say, oh, by the way, we want to put 4 ADUs here as well.
Yeah.
Because it's a big lot. Now, that might be great, that might be what we want, but we want to make sure that that's what we're expecting, that as houses get broken up into condos and smaller units, are we now allowing a ADU for each of these principal dwelling units?
That wouldn't be allowed. Because the condo. That one house broken up inside into units. Would meet the definition of a separate dwelling.
Really? Principal dwelling unit? What's the difference?
so what's the difference between that and
Like a
duplex? Yeah,
The duplex has, it's the way the house is designed. The duplex is two
single
separate.
family homes.
You could split it down the middle and pull them apart. They could stand on. A condo is interior space, all. It's under one structure, so you can't pull out a condo unit. And that's the way I visualize it.
Yeah.
But isn't there, don't we have condos that are separate buildings? Thinking down on Campground Road, there's a 5-unit project over there, it's 5 separate buildings, but they're condos. I don't know if there's anything else in town, but that one just jumps to it.
Cottage. Yeah, well, some of the cottage colonies are condos.
I mean, if
Those
someone
are
comes along
not-
in this example and wants to build 5 more ADUs because they've been 4.
But those are not
But then you're
year-round.
still looking at the total land mass and whether you can build within that.
But those cottage colonies that are owners, you know, they're condoed. They are not year-round, single-family dwellings. And if they convert, then those have to be year-round rentals,
Because of the motel cottage
yeah,
bylaw we passed.
so I don't. Think that would be the same situation. I guess I'm also remembering that in the bylaw. In another section of bylaw, we have the blanket provision that you can apply for a special permit then for anything that's simply not prohibited, so. I guess someone could use that, if we're not specifically prohibiting that you can't have a.
And the reason I'm bringing this up is that we all anticipate, you know, the mental model in all of our minds, I believe, is that, you know, someone can build an ADU somewhere on their lot. Well, that's great, we have this additional housing for your grandmother or a young adult. But I'm seeing these loopholes where somebody can subdivide a larger property and get twice as many units on a property, as long as half of them are only the 900 square feet or whatever the square footage is looking at.
And there are folks coming in for ADUs that have no intention of renting them.
Well, if you subdivide a large piece of property,
You still have.
you're only allowed to build one single family dwelling unless you're doing a duplex. So if you split off 4 acres into an acre each, you can only build 4 units and you could have an ADU on each lot.
No, I was saying the redevelopment, let's say you had a 4-acre lot with one big house on it, and you break that house up.
Meaning
4 separate entryways. That existing building. Now, can I build 4 ADUs on the other side of the lot?
I don't. That wouldn't be a duplex. And
And I don't, that doesn't say anything about duplex, so, you know, it just talks about principal dwelling units.
If you took a 4-acre lot and you subdivided it so that you had 4 separate principal dwellings. Assuming that you could meet the site coverage and the septic requirements. Each of those 4 could have an ADU.
Yeah, and in that example, I'm fine with, because that's an expected result. I'm going the other way of saying that, no, you don't subdivide the lot.
But you turn the house into a
My
multi-family.
question
becomes
is,
a
under the
multi-family.
fractional ownership, can you take a single family home and make it 4? I didn't think you could do that. Under fractional ownership, the prohibition. Taking a
well,
single,
I mean, you could break up a big old antique house into 4 apartments inside.
but he was talking about condos.
Yeah.
But then
But
it's.
we don't, that's
multifamily.
ownership, they don't regulate, somebody doesn't regulate the ownership.
And except for the fractional owner.
Yeah, but
Well,
it could
yeah,
be,
but you're not. Where would that run afoul of that?
Yeah, each unit
Unless
is
it's a
wholly owned
feature.
by one individual, as opposed to, the fractional ownership means. That's more of a co-op model, saying that, hey,
Yeah.
you know, 4 families own this farmhouse together and we get 4
Okay.
units, as opposed to, I own this condo, here's my
I see.
plot plan for my condo, and then we have common ridge all the way around. And now that you know, as the person who develops that and subdivides that farmhouse into 4 units, which I think is the right thing to happen instead of having these cold empty farmhouses around. But by this, and my reading of this, we're also enabling them not just to redevelop that farmhouse, now to build 4 ADUs on that same parcel along with everything else lines up. That all might be what we want to do, that might be a good thing to happen, but we should realize that this is potential enabling.
But
that to happen.
if you took that. Farmhouse and you subdivided it into 4 units. Then it becomes a multifamily unit. Not a single family or duplex.
And but each principal dwelling unit has the right to an ADU.
To your question, the definition of principal dwelling unit. As the foundation of the structure, is that the structure of this?
Well,
Are we calling the big farmhouse that's now 4 apartments or 4 condos a unit? Or are we calling it 4 units?
That's
I don't
well,
think
it's
it's
four
four
units,
units.
before units,
I don't think
four
we can do
separately
that.
owned units, condos.
because residential district. The uses are 1-family dwellings and duplex dwellings.
Those are the only
You
two
can't
allowed.
do multifamily.
That was something we should change too.
Maybe.
But to that end, you could divide that farmhouse then
But,
into
yeah,
2.
my issue is that I would love to see these big farmhouses get divided into 4 units, you know, because it saves everything we want. The streetscape is the same.
Yeah.
You know, but what I don't wanna see is this beautiful farmhouse get subdivided into 4 condos, and then all of a sudden 4 ADUs pop up in the backyard. That I think is a lot of density.
Well, I agree. I think you've just raised another issue that we need to verify is just, yeah. It's, I agree, these old farmhouses, they should be divided interior. To get the density without any visual impact, so that's actually a question I gotta look up. Can someone actually do that? Now,
Yeah,
or do we
yeah.
need to tweak that? But I think what I'm hearing is. Don't necessarily want, let's just assume. You can. Divide the interior of those units, that big old house. You don't. Want it, so you could then have an ADU for each one of those, so that would be.
Is it possible that we could say that, one ADU is permitted by right for each? Plot, well, house lot? That's the justified pushback here is that. We don't wanna create, I don't envision seeing. A bunch of ADUs being built on the same lot, I wouldn't.
Well, if you say house lot though, and you did a duplex, that's still one lot. Now you just reduced by 1 the number of ADUs that you could allow.
I think we have to
Yeah,
use
that's on
the principal dwelling, because that's what the state. Is basing on, but. That's a good point.
Clarify what principal dwelling unit means.
Right, you could have those 4 condos, but you'll say the one with the front door is the principal one, and the other 3. You own them outright,
Or accessory.
but they don't have the right to the ADU, only one ADU.
So we have a legal, legal
that?
question
Stretch,
here
right?
about principal dwelling units. Let's just talk about, Paula, I know you, so we have this issue to track down. But then the larger issue of, we've got some language in here that may or may not fly, it's interesting, so we've also got a timeline. This would have to get presented to the planning board and approved, again, like any other zoning change, and then back to the select board to get on the warrant, so we've got to put this into our process. And the process would have us, doing the public notice. You've already done the legal notice, correct, for the,
No, that has to go in,
on February 19th.
yeah,
And when you do the legal notice, I would assume that the materials then need to be available for people to look at.
yeah, they'll be on. the
Okay,
website.
so that's the 19th. We're at the 11th. So we need to get something before then, correct?
Before the planning board,
Yeah. Cause they have to
Yeah.
vote on it.
right, they're not voting on anything until March 19th.
Our schedule.
I'm gonna put.
Oh, they're not,
I'm gonna put
they're
some
not voting
information.
till March 19th.
I'm
Okay,
gonna put some information in the
Okay.
February 19th packet.
okay. And we are meeting on March 11th, so we will have a little time. You
Right.
gotta track down these things.
Yeah, and it's still, anything can be changed. Once, that's the whole point of the public hearing, so it doesn't mean that this is the final draft, and it has to be all set in stone, we just have to have, it's just there. We wanna have it online when the legal notice runs, just, so people can go see what's up, but.
Yeah.
But we can still change things
Sure.
up until. The March 19th.
Okay,
So it's like, we
Okay.
don't have to have, we can still work things out and whatever, but it's just I wanna have it substantially like ready. But we can still tweak things. And again, obviously, someone may come up March 19th with like something we never thought of. It's like, oh yeah, we gotta.
so this is another question. I think you've answered this question for me before, but if we haven't, let's talk to Carolyn about it. Let's say we keep some of your language in seasonal community, just because, let's push the boundaries and see if we can keep it in. So we get to town meeting, it all gets approved, but then the AG finally comes down and says, no, this one phrase does not cut mustard. That doesn't mean, I think we have stuff, there was like severability clause that was in all of our bylaws that said if, one thing isn't legal, it doesn't throw out everything else. So the worst case scenario is if the AG takes them till next fall to say, you can't have this restriction, it wouldn't negate anything else. It would just negate a line or two in our, but I just want to
Right, yeah,
understand
they could go through and say, we approve everything except these
This one.
specific items. And unless that item was a fatal flaw to the whole. What's holding everything together, then
Yeah.
so they could strike this Community Provisions
Yeah.
Act.
that. Okay,
So should we keep going?
So, that's what I want, I added in. Added in that the ADU is subject to the site coverage standards, section 743. Added in that ADUs shall not be used as guest houses. That's just a rabbit hole, but
I mean, what's the definition of a guest house? Sorry.
a guest house is limited to 250 square feet, and it's supposed to be a one-room structure that's used for guests
And it doesn't have cooking facilities.
and no cooking facilities.
and there are some indications that some ADU folks that are coming into the pipeline are looking to be glorified guest houses,
That are much bigger than 250
square feet.
So I'll go through this just because I've spent so much mental energy on this. I might as well share it, but I don't think we have to solve this issue, but. Well, it does relate to a point here, so. The ADUs are supposed to be rented year round, current, and we want to keep that. I think we will be able to keep that. I'm wondering if we actually need to have a line, and I put it in here that specifies they have to be actively rented for the life of the unit. Otherwise, and this came up, I was talking to someone last Friday, they're building an ADU. They were basically saying, yeah, if I rent it, I have to rent it year round, but he's not gonna rent it. What are you gonna do with it? Not renting it, well, we'll just use it for when
My
guests.
son-in-law comes.
So that's essentially a guest house, so you have this. So there's that issue, just like at the top, people may use that, but then there's also like, I have the ADU, I'm doing everything by the book, but. I don't wanna be a landlord anymore, or the next person buys the house, they don't wanna deal with it,
Good, right.
technically. They would have to. Decommission the unit, which basically means take the cooking facilities out, maybe as simple as unplugging the stove and taking out, but at the bare minimum, but. So now you have a building that's. Bigger than a bread box, it's it's not a guest house.
We
it's
have the
not-
impact on the community, but no benefits.
The
Right.
benefits, yeah.
So I went down this whole thing about, do we have to like really be stringent about, you gotta really not just unplug the stove, but. Make it. Have a carve out, cause it may be bigger than 250 square feet, but you gotta like tear out the interior walls, make it into one room. I went down, and I think that's. Creating more problems than it's worth
Yeah.
solving, but just the mental exercise of how to. What are you left with? You're left with this thing that's not an ADU and it's bigger than a guest house, and it's not the other studio space, it's not an art studio, so. I don't know that we can solve that, but where this comes down to for right now is, should we have language that basically specifies like. The ADU has to be rented year round and you have to actively. Rent it for as long as that unit meets the definition of an ADU, it should be rented continuously. some carve out language that. If you have to take it offline to renovate it or repair it or something. You know. There's an exception to that, but limited exception.
You know, we live in an aging community, people that have. People that own property don't necessarily need the income, so you can imagine people as they get into their 80s and so forth, won't want the income. They may do this now, but 5 years from now, they're like, you know, it's not worth the hassle. I'm gonna convert it to my wood shop, or I'm gonna convert it to an art studio. Of which they would not have been allowed to have done that to begin with.
So. This is the section, so I. Alter this, the ADU shall not be used as short-term rental. Be explicit about that. The ADU shall be actively rented or leased on a year-round basis until such time as the ADU no longer meets the definition of an ADU. And then I just put this
The 1 year waiver.
placeholder, 1 year waiver. So I have been operating under this interpretation of what we have now is, it says it has to be rented year round, so that I just take that to mean you have to actively rent it, but this kind of. Raised the interpretation of like, because this guy was saying, yeah, but that's if I rent it. There's nothing that actually explicitly says, it says that you have to rent it, it says you have to get a rental certificate. But if I'm not renting it, I won't get a rental certificate.
So the 1 year waiver gives the situation like it came up with this argument came up with the cottage colonies. What if I want to take my unit offline and do renovation? You know, and the answer there was, well, you have to get a rental certificate so you don't lose your rental certificate. That was the grandfathering of that, but we did, you know. We did assume that there could be some construction, so I think this allows someone to do rehab at some point.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing, you would still pull your rental certificate. But you're just not renting, right? And then you would have.
Unforeseen circumstances could be the owner has health conditions,
Yeah,
or the
yeah,
owner is
yeah.
aged, all these things that we know we'll see.
The owner dies and the property's in an estate,
In the state.
yeah. So there's a lot of situations, yeah. But I mean. One of the things I like about this language that makes it more explicit. And when we were looking at, a couple of years back, when we were doing the development limits. We looked at a bunch of court cases, Weston, Brookline, and Linfield. And they all were found in favor of the town, and then they all appealed to the state Supreme Court. And the towns, again, were upheld that they had the right to regulate uses. Actually, Massachusetts gives you pretty broad rights. However, in terms of whether the specific town regulation was appropriate, that all three of the cases, the judges went back and pulled literally intent language. Did the zoning code articulate the intent? What was the purpose and intent? And so I've been going through, you know, when we're doing the development guidelines, I went through and I highlighted every intent and I said, make sure every one of these words is in our bylaw, because they will look at, you know, there's the principle, can the town do that? And then did the town follow its own regulations and intent? That's where you have to sort of put out the principle of what you're trying to achieve, not only just the language.
But as you were saying, Paul, then 10 says you no longer, if you don't rent it, it's no longer considered an ADU. So then what happens?
So that would go down to this section, which is determination that you failed to comply with the provisions basically means you've abandoned the right to have the ADU and you have to decommission. Do whatever you need to do to make it safe and meet building safety health codes. Again, it may be as simple as unplugging an electric stove, but when we talk through this on the staff level about, we have to have a procedure in place to follow through with this. So basically requiring some paperwork to verify this, and then the building commissioner go out and, you know, visually say, yes, you want to plug the stove. I mean, it could get more complicated. You got gas and stuff, you would have to pull a permit, do it properly, and then that would all have a permit paper trail to verify that. So then that's how we would track which units come in and out of the ADU list. So we would have a kind of a master list of all the ADUs that are properly permitted and are out there. They have to register every year with the health department. The health department's collecting a copy of the year-round lease to verify that. And then those units are flagged as ADUs in their rental database, so then they can send those up to us to make sure we have the affidavit, and basically that's how we could monitor that. So if one of the ADUs is not on the annual list, like they didn't pull a rental certificate, then we gotta call them and figure what's the deal. So they gotta get on that and get back in it, or if you're gonna discontinue the ADU, then you go down this path where we decommission it and verify it.
And not only that, but this says, the owners make the ADU a separate dwelling unit shall be removed from the property within 90 days.
Yeah.
So it means you physically, if the ADU was a separate building, you have to demolish the building?
No,
No,
you have, that's just the element that makes it a separate dwelling unit is essentially the kitchen. And specifically the cooking facility, so the fact that there's a stove in there, so that's why the decommissioning could be a very simple
Okay.
process, but then we just want to track that. So at least, so then if someone starts to play games and then they word of mouth, oh, they're renting that, they put the stove back, at least we have paper trails.
Right.
And then we can follow up.
And then there's a fine of not more than $300 for each offense.
and read the next sentence.
Yeah, I'm reading.
Yeah.
I. That has some teeth to it.
So
It's later that.
300 per day.
It's my seat then.
Is there a loophole, Paul? So let's say I want to build a giant art studio, and I know I can't do it. Can I call it an ADU for a year? And build an ADU and get the benefit of this, and then move my art supplies in after a year and say I'm not gonna rent it anymore, and I pulled out the stove?
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can do that.
Um,
Well, it depends, if you triggered any commercial interest, then the town would have rights. Like if you were selling your art or displaying your art, who went into any commercial, there would be a violation there. But if you just had your own private,
Well,
studio gallery.
There's-
you could have
allowed
a
to
yoga
have-
studio out in your back.
well, you're allowed to have a home occupation,
Oh.
so there's certain parameters you could be selling your own art.
If you wanted to build. You know, the site coverage limits, et cetera, an accessory building to the property. Like a shed,
Well, so this
it's
is
not an ADU.
the scenario
Right.
you just described is the one that I find problematic
Yeah.
most because there's no size limit currently on the studio space.
If I'm an installation artist and I build, massive pieces and I wanna build myself 1,000 square foot barn to do it. And I have the
900.
site coverage to do it and I have the setbacks to do it.
Well, you can do that anyways.
You can just
Right.
do
So
that.
if I built a 1,000 square foot ADU, discovered that I hate being a landlord. And now I wanna use that as a
But would
barn
that,
that I
would that have been
built.
permitted? What my point was, would that have been permitted? You know, we're giving,
Yes, it would.
right, you're getting, to bypass some of our zoning laws if you call it an ADU. And then when you decommission it a year later, you've got,
Size was. Cause
Well,
you
right
guess,
now you have to build an ADU, if you started out legitimately building an ADU, they have to be basically 900 square foot building. Which is bigger than a guest house.
right,
it doesn't have to be 900, it's up to.
The max-
Up to
I wrote
900
to
or half.
900.
So you could do that. You rent it for a year, then whatever, you get sick of it or something happens. I don't wanna rent it anymore. Pull out the stove. And now it's no longer defined as an ADU, but what are you gonna use it for? I'm gonna put my art supplies in there, or I'm gonna just have my guests sleep over. in it, so it's like. Yeah, you
So-
could definitely play a game with this.
Sitting room, yeah.
Yeah, so but if you,
Sorry, well, the other point I would put, studio, the definition of studio doesn't have any size limit attached to it. It's supposed to be for, you know, legitimately for use as you're an artist or whatever. And, but,
musician,
but
there's no
no
size.
one's monitoring that, so, yeah, I do watercolors and this is my studio and there's no size limit, so. And you get these accessory buildings now that are just floating around, and this has come up at planning board, same thing, I got a detached one-car garage that. You know, it's kinda too, can't really pull in my. More modern sized car, you know, it's from the fifties, this garage, I'm just gonna,
Low ceiling, like.
low ceiling, so I'm gonna like insulate it, and now it's my exercise studio. Or whatever, and it's like, it's too big to be a guest house. I'm not claiming to be an artist, it's not an ADU, it's like, so there's. Some ambiguity about these,
But there's a difference between something that's existing. Like a garage, for example, and coming before the planning board to build something new. And if you wanna come to the planning board and build an art studio. And you meet all the setbacks and size requirements. You can do that.
but and someone may do that, I am an artist and I'm doing this, but then. The next person who buys the property. Isn't an artist, but now they just have this building that. Not gonna be used as a studio, I'm just saying, I'm not saying we have a solution to that, but it just blends into this whole ADU thing, when you start decommissioning ADUs. Then they don't fit into any other category other than just an accessory building, and it's not being used for what.
What we want.
intended.
Could you add this to the list? Carolyn represents a lot of towns. This is not a unique issue, and I think it's like a. I don't wanna call it an unintended consequence, but just an element of ADUs as people were proposing building them. I don't think I've ever seen any policy discussion about decommissioning or changing them. Per se, I mean, in the world of housing, as people have talked about ADUs, have they dealt with this issue at all? Carolyn, have you seen
I've not
anything?
seen anything.
So the only thing we have in the current bylaw is that if you have a guest. You have a guest house, you can't have a guest house and an ADU, but we have to strike that because now everyone's entitled, so basically we just changed it to. A guest house can be converted to an ADU. And. So
Right. Yeah, I think it's worth asking Carolyn. Sort of the decommissioning question.
So I just want to go through, circle back on anything else you want, but so that section. Is new language. This is just clarifying that owner occupancy is not required. We don't require that now, but just clarifying it. This is just talking about pre-existing non-conforming. It's still subject to dimensional controls. So again, you're allowed to have it, but only if you meet the site coverage, and if you're in the setback, you just have to go to ZBA. The debate isn't whether or not you can have it, basically gotta get to yes, but you still have the opportunity to. Walk through any dimensional issues, they're not exempt from that. This whole section would be struck because. We're not requiring special permits anymore for the use itself.
Could you get 13 for a second? Just over that one, 13 in blue right there. I'm not sure if I'm not understanding that sentence. You shall not be eligible for zoning use variances, that's agreed, yeah. Or for dimensional variance relief, proposing to increase the allowable number.
Oh, I'm glad,
So
I'm
that
glad
two
you have,
sentences?
glad you have the eagle eye on this. This is actually to the earlier point. This would say you can't do multiple ADUs.
Someone's version, but not my version. I don't understand. I can't follow that sentence.
ADUs are not eligible for zoning variance, so you can't go to ZBA for a variance saying I have a hardship that I need an ADU.
Okay.
Separate from the special permit thing, so.
So the by right doesn't include, you know, your
Art.
topography of
Right.
your topography or things of that nature that are,
That's a zoning use variance. I thought a zoning use variance is I want to open up a barber shop in my.
Well, yes, that's use variances. A special permit, an ADU in a non-residential by right, so. That's how that, your example is right, like I wanna open a barber shop in the middle of the residential zone, the use isn't allowed. We don't allow use variances at all for anything in town. This would translate to this, like I wanna build an ADU. In a zoning district that doesn't allow. We're allowing ADUs basically. In the DCPC. The only place this would apply would be. Pretty much everything allows residential to some capacity. The Marina District, which is basically just Rock Harbor. That might be it. It's technically everywhere else. Except for, I think we carved out core commercial, we don't allow single family homes.
What's the second half of that sentence mean? For dimensional variance relief proposing to increase the allowable number of ADUs.
That's the part, I think that applies to having additional. ADUs.
Is this coming right from the state, this sentence, or is this ours?
That's what the town council put that in. To address the multiple ADUs, so that's, doesn't need to be in there. Put that in there, assuming. You don't want extra ADUs, you wanna keep it as one per principal, so.
So if you get a duplex, you can put in 2 ADUs, you can use this to go for a third.
Right.
but see, I just read this narrowly, that you can't go to the ZBA for a variance for hardship. It's sort of like. You know. Someone's got a lot, half the lot is, sloping or something, and they have to reposition their building, they get a slight variance, because they can't physically do it. I don't think this applies to your like 4-acre farmhouse.
No, I wasn't trying that.
Yes, yeah.
I think I'm just a little dense getting over a cold here. I'm not digesting that sentence at all. I mean, if it's not clear to me, I think it's.
Maybe it needs to be split into 2 sentences, first of all.
Maybe there's another way to say dimensional variance relief.
If the ADU was falling off the cliff, let's say I'm on the seashore, my ADU is close to the cliff. It's not saying anything about, like, in one way of interpreting this is, you can't go and move the ADU. Are we gonna give the ADU relief from the natural erosion of the cliff?
Well, this is saying to increase the allowable number of ADUs on a lot. That example is. The
180.
one ADU is gonna fall into the water. Yes, they would. That's a dimension, that's.
That
a different type
ADU
of
would have to
variance.
come down either naturally or.
I think actually the word dimensional, it shouldn't be in there. Because I think you are entitled to be able to get the dimensional variance to move it back from the cliff.
It's 113.
But not to increase the allowable number of ADUs, second part of that
Right.
sentence.
So the zoning use variances, like we said, you can't. Always say I want to use this ADU for a commercial aspect, barber shop. But the ADU, and if I read that, the second half of the sentence says, the ADU shall not be used for the dimensional variance relief proposing to increase the allowable number of ADUs on the lot.
Like I said, I don't think if you take dimensional out, it's saying not eligible, ADUs are not eligible for variances for relief. Variance relief proposing to increase the number of ADUs on the lot beyond what you're allowed to by right. You can't come in and claim some hardship like I need to build 5 ADUs on this lot. You're only entitled to one. You got a single family house, you can have 1 ADU. You can
Yeah,
have a
that's what I thought was
duplex.
covered in the second section, when it said, you know, 180 primary residence.
Could I propose we add this? I got 3 things that we're gonna ask Carolyn about, only because we're at
Yeah,
12
one time, yeah,
and
sorry.
I'm a little.
Well, I guess,
We can't
so
wordsmith
the
it.
guidance would be, do we want to only have 1 ADU per principal dwelling unit, assuming the condo issue, but just as we.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes,
Alright, so if I know that, then we can look from the language to make sure it's clear.
Okay.
I'll discuss the condo and the interior division scenario, just to make sure there's no loose thread there, but basically the intent is. 1 unit per single family home as we,
Right.
or a duplex.
Carolyn, is there another scenario, that, let's say somebody has a single family home and they own 6 acres. And they want, not subdivide it, but they want to build 48 ADUs, could they build 4 ADUs? On that process, you know, using all that 6 acres and,
Just the AD,
could you build, you know, that's getting to the point where we're saying it's 1 ADU per residence, but. Is there an argument to allow them to do that? What's the opposite side of that?
Oh, that we're hampering development on a large lot.
well, you're getting into the
Yeah.
ADU is starting to get into multifamily housing, you know, I mean, I think the ADU, the spirit of that law was it's an accessory kind of dwelling. As opposed
That's
to
why,
a whole
that's why I
development.
agree that it should be
Yeah.
1-to-1.
Right.
Okay.
No, I'll just give it.
that's why we're trying to use the single family.
Yeah.
The single dwelling. So, yeah, if you have an apartment building. That's not a single, that's a building with multiple residences in it,
Right.
but they're not all entitled to each have an ADU.
But I think what they're asking is if you have a 3-acre lot. And there's one house on the lot. Primary principal dwelling. You do 1 ADU. And what you're saying is there's enough land. To build 40. And why not allow for?
Yeah, that's why I'm looking for the other side of the argument, right?
That-
Because Paul said, are we all happy with restricting 1 ADU
Right.
per domicile? Or per
I
resident?
think, sorry, I think we were talking about then as a different development track in other sections of our bylaw that is subdivision,
Yeah,
Right.
subdivision, yeah.
Right.
right? And say, nope, you're not building them as ADUs. They can't all be accessories to one building, but you can subdivide
Right.
and
Yeah, okay.
That's okay.
Subdivide it and
build a
build
bunch of rentals.
4 tiny homes.
Oh, yeah, that's what we want to see.
Yeah.
Okay. We're looking for, make sure this doesn't get loopholes.
No, that's why we're having discussions.
Okay,
Do we need to? Make any kind of motion or take any action on this to get it for the public? For the legal notice?
well, we're gonna meet on the 11th. Before the public notice goes out on the 19th. So I think maybe we send Paul back off to try to square up some of the
Okay.
legal questions and then we come back. I'll just bless the document before it goes out. Does that sound fine? Okay. All right, we've talked about the schedule a bit. That was the other thing on the agenda.
Meeting on March, no, well, the legal notice for the ADU will go out obviously before then. The legal notice will have. Whatever the.
February 19th.
Whatever the current draft is, but then we
Yeah,
can
that's
still change
subject
it.
to change.
Change it, okay. All right. So, we're back here on March 11th. And we have, 2 important, certainly the public meeting and the Cape Cod Commission hearing are probably the 2 biggest things coming up. One, Conservation Commission tonight, if anyone wants to zoom in, and then those 2 sessions. And I will acknowledge we have not had a moment to have the quiet meeting to talk about our future and membership and work plan for next year. I have it. I have it.
Right.
And the minute we can do it, we'll do it. So we'll get past that. Paul, do you have any other business that needs to come before the group? No? Okay. Hearing no other business, do I have a motion to adjourn? Kevin, second? All in favor? Aye.
Right?
Thank you so much.